Can you really learn to be more optimistic so you're able to handle stressful situations better? Well, in this podcast, we explain how it is absolutely possible to rewire your brain for positive outcomes and reframe your perceptions to triggering events.
We'll talk you through the amazing ABC model as a tool to manage your reactions, take control and minimise your stress, so you're able to live a healthier, happier midlife. Hi, I'm James Davis.
And I'm Claire Davis.
We're the Midlife Mentors, here to lift the lid on how to achieve health and happiness.
The balanced, no-nonsense way.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Midlife Mentors with me, James.
And me, Claire. How are you all doing out there? So, today we are going to talk to you about something we're really excited. We're always really excited to talk to you about everything we talk to you about on our podcast. But I actually did an interview with Stylist Magazine. Just drop that in there, you know, shameless plug. I did an interview with Stylist Magazine. A lovely lady called Alex interviewed me, and we were talking all about what we're going to talk to you today about, which is actually how to manage stress using the ABC model. Now, ABC model is really cognitive behavioural therapy, but we kind of use it with our clients in certain respects anyway. But it's a really, really helpful tool that you can use in your life to actually help you stress less and learn optimism. So that's one of the key things around this model, ABC model, that we're going to take you through. It's not just managing your stress levels, it's actually rewiring your brain to become more optimistic. So really excited to take you through that today.
Really excited. And of course, you know, we've talked before on podcasts about work from the field of positive psychology and how optimists, you know, experience better outcomes in life, have better physical health, better mental health. So, you know, we're going to share with you today, basically, as Claire said, the ABC model to help you regain that optimistic thinking or learn optimistic thinking. Yeah,
exactly. So you've heard us say before, your reaction is everything. The only thing we can ever really control is our reaction to certain outside events. And never before have we really realised that in the last 18 months. But you know, it's our response basically to stressful events based on our perception of that event that causes the stress in the first place. You know, if people's perception is irrational, so we've got rational and irrational responses really to outside stressors and internal stressors as well. But if it's irrational, a lot of the time we think in absolute terms. So if you've got an irrational response to something, chances are you're thinking of that in absolute terms. You know, this is wrong and it's always wrong. It's always going to be wrong. Or I am bad at this. I am terrible at maths. I'm not good at managing money. All these real absolute terms that we tell ourselves. We also tend to presume what other people are thinking. This is a really big one.
Yeah, our minds tend to fill in the blanks. When we're faced with something unknown, our subconscious will attempt to make sense of it by filling in the blanks for us, which has its advantages, but a lot of time can be really unhelpful because we're also pre-programmed for survival, which means we'll tend to look for the worst case scenario so we can anticipate what we'll need to do to survive it.
Well, just on that, actually, you know, I was saying to Alex that we are hardwired. Our brain is hardwired in this way already. It's hardwired to, I suppose, be pessimistic. We're going to talk about optimism and pessimism. But we are hardwired. It's our survival instinct to look for danger, look for the worst case scenario, so actually we could stay alive. That was how we've been designed, is to look for the worst case scenario. So we are prepared. When something happens, we know how to deal with it. However, that isn't particularly relevant in today's society, but we're still hardwired to look for those dangers and actually look at the worst case scenario and catastrophize things. Another thing that we tend to do if we're responding to situations and stressful situations outside of ourselves or within ourselves, we assume that situations will always turn out the same. So we combine all those previous experiences that we've got and assume that it's always going to turn out that way. So people that find that they are experiencing a lot of stress in their rational sense will have a thinking that is in absolute terms. It will presume what other people are thinking, and they will assume situations will always turn out the same. So, it's the more pessimistic person is more likely to have that irrational response to an event. And all this stuff comes out of a model that was created a long time ago, an ABC model called Dr. Albert Ellis. And then it was adapted in 1990 in a book called Learned Optimism. And this guy was Dr. Martin Seligman. So that's why we're kind of talking about learned optimism, because people think that their response to activities, stressors, anything is actually fixed. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be that way. We talk about neuroscience a lot. We are completely able to rewire and re-hard code our brain to be more positive.
That's right. Our brain is actually plastic. We have something called neuroplasticity, which means we can actually change the physical context of our brain. We can form new neural pathways, we can change neural pathways. This is all recent kind of research in the last 20 years or so, as we've got the technology to do these advanced level scannings of brain activity. But yeah, we have this ability to change our beliefs, change our perception of situations, and basically adapt our behavior as a result. So it means we can basically learn to be optimistic. We can learn to have better outcomes in our life.
And this ABC model is exactly that. It's actually giving you practical strategies to start rewiring your brain for optimism rather than just looking for the worst case scenario. It's a super, super useful tool for managing the reaction and in turn, obviously, the stress that we then experience. Because it regulates our emotions and actually stops. We're not going to talk too much about the physiology of stress because we've done that in previous podcasts. But it does help regulate our emotions and stop or decrease that flight, fight and freeze response when they're not really warranted. Our body, James talks about this in a lot more detail during some of our stress workshops that we do for corporates, but our body hormonally reacts in exactly the same way to the email pinging in from your boss late at night as it does to a saber-toothed tiger jumping out on the plains in Africa. It doesn't know the difference. It's still the same stress response. So, these are really effective tools in order to manage your health and happiness because, as we say all the time, stress is the silent killer. It's one of those things that we've got used to in life and normalised. We've normalised stress and actually we've forgotten how to even understand and get in contact and connect with our body to know that we're in that stress response because we've normalised it so much.
Exactly, and they're saying, it's not the stress that will kill you or injure you, it's your reaction to it, which you are in control of. You always get this instant when a stressor occurs, you've got the trigger event, you'll have your automatic reaction to it. But if you can learn to kind of take control of that and control your reaction, you can start to manage it much more effectively and much more positively, which is what this technique is about.
Yeah, and we are going to go on to that. I just want to say a word, actually, about pessimism and optimism. I know...
Glass half full, glass half empty debate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can all recognise these things in ourselves, right? I spoke to Alex about this, and we're speaking to you about this. Absolutely. It's not to devolve responsibility, but we are hardwired, as I've said, to really see the dangers and the pessimism and the what ifs in a bad way. We use our imagination for the worst case scenarios. So it's not necessarily our fault we're hardwired like this, but I just want you to have a think about when I say some of these things, actually whether you are recognising a lot of these elements in yourself. A word on pessimist, there's a permanency to an event or a situation, whereas an optimist will believe that they are temporary. So we're giving you the example of a pessimist and an optimist. there's a permanency to an event or a situation. If you're a pessimist, if you're an optimist, they believe it's temporary. You know, this will pass, this too shall pass. Whereas pessimists really, really hang on to it and think it's going to last forever, which is quite stressful. Pessimists are also really general. They use really universal sweeping statements. Something like, all of my reports at work are useless. I'll never hold down that relationship. Whereas an optimist might think, that one report was not great, and that one relationship wasn't great, but they're not all bad. So you see the difference. You know, there's a real universal stuck in your ways element to pessimism, and an optimism sees things as less permanent and doesn't generalise. And lastly, pessimists, we tend to blame, I say we because we all do this, tend to blame themselves a lot for things going wrong. You know, I'm dumb, this is all my fault. Whereas an optimist might think, you know, I don't know that thing yet. I don't know it yet, but I'm going to learn in time how to do it. So you see the difference. They're subtle but quite huge at the same time.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning here a psychological construct called confirmation bias, which basically means that you find what you're looking for. So, you know, if you have a generally pessimistic view of the world, you're likely to see many things through the day that back up that viewpoint. You know, on the flip side, if you take a more optimistic view of the world, you'll like to see things that give you an optimistic viewpoint. Again, this has been proved by lots of different fascinating studies, which I love reading about.
But, I know.
It's a great area.
It was so funny when I was on the phone to Alex. I was like, am I being too geeky? Am I giving you too much background? She was like, no, this is amazing. The whole concept of learning optimism in a world where we are told that everything is scary, everything is fearful. You know, we're bombarded with terrible news all the time. And it's not to say it's not happening, but just being bombarded with all this fear messaging constantly is obviously going to feed. It's the wolf you feed, right?
Yeah.
The wolf you're feeding there is a pessimistic, worrying, dangerous one. Whereas the optimist, you can learn how to look for the good things in life and to respond in a way that serves you and serves your health and happiness. So we're going to talk about the ABC model now.
It's easy to remember, isn't it? ABC.
ABC?
Easy as...
They do not need us singing.
Actually, do something. So A stands for the activating event, which is basically the trigger, the thing that causes you the stress. The B stands for your beliefs and assumptions. So, you know, what that triggers in, and then C is the consequences, what happens as a result of that. So the ABC, if you just remember, like activating event, belief, consequence.
Yeah.
And then we're going to tell you how remembering those. So it's a very easy acronym to remember, the activating, belief, consequence. Then how you utilise that awareness to change your state around it.
So I'll just give you an example. You know, it's actually interesting because A is actually followed by C, and then sandwiched in between is the B. But we can obviously understand it a lot easier with A, B, C. So I'll give you an example. The activating event might be you're told that you're going to be doing a sales pitch at work. The consequence is you start sweating profusely, you're anxious, so you shout at your child or you shout at your spouse because you're anxious. You might have you could even have like a physiological response, you know, like an upset stomach or something like that. And the reason that's happening, that consequence, is because your belief could be something like, I always mess up those pitches. Last time that happened, people talked over me, so it must mean that I'm not good at those things. You know, I don't have a very big presence. I don't have much charisma. That's the sandwich belief between A and C.
And let's talk a little bit. Let's throw something into the mix here. I mentioned confirmation bias. So let's give an example of this. You know, your boss turns around and says to you, oh, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. It's 5 p.m. on a Monday. So Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., you need to give a presentation to this team somewhere. So your immediate reaction will probably be, unless you're really good at these things, like, oh no, I always stuff up these kind of presentations. I don't have enough time to prepare. This is going to be awful. Because remember, Claire mentioned that generalization. We go into generalization mode. I'm always terrible at this. I'm always awful at this. I'm going to muck it up. Consequence coming out of that is, A, you're going to be really anxious and nervous going into presentation. You probably will stuff it up because you're going with the expectation that you're going to muck it up. Yeah. It's probably not going to be as great as it could have been. If you were able to take control of it and go, wow, this is a great opportunity. I don't have much time here, but this will allow me to be really concise in my delivery and give a killer presentation to these people and go in full of confidence, you're probably going to give something a lot better. So it's just about changing your state around it.
Totally. I'll give you another example that I gave as well. Outside work, an activating event might be a date coming up. So you've been out of the dating scene for a while, you've got a date coming up. So that's the activating event. Okay, something that you've chosen to do, you're going on this date. The consequence is that you might be really, really anxious, stressed and worried.
Oh, it's like me when I was waiting for dates with you.
Wondering whether I'll turn up.
Exactly.
That is a true story if you've listened to some of our other podcasts. You might even, I don't know, have an alcoholic drink before you go because you're so stressed. So that's a trigger in a behaviour. But the belief system behind that behaviour is... it could be, I'm not very interesting, men or women don't like me, I'm not good on dates, I always seem to stuff them up, I'm boring, I'm not interesting, those sorts of things. Or I've been out of this for too long, no one's going to find me attractive. So that's another example of the ABC playing out. So just want you to really kind of have a think when we go through some strategies right now of how you might want to use this, and some extra ones as well, just how you might use them in your own life. So firstly, strategy number 1, now we've explained the theory behind it and given some examples, we'd like you, when this happens to you, an activating event, something that triggers you, just be curious. Be curious when it happens. I always say, don't judge yourself. Don't look at trying to change it right now. Just be curious. So, as we always say, awareness precedes change. It's where your power lies. So find an example of when that activating event happens. Chances are when it does happen in the moment, you're not going to want to do this. You're probably too busy playing it all out. But maybe afterwards, think of an example when you get stressed, the trigger, activating event. What was the consequence? Go to the C first. What was the emotional, physical, behavioural responses? What did you do? Did you shout at someone? Did you go into yourself? Do you not phone the person that you said you were going to phone? Did you withdraw from life a little bit? What was some of the consequences that you had because of that activating event? And the biggest thing, because your beliefs really are the dominating force behind this, what were your beliefs and your assumptions? What were you telling yourself? What were the beliefs that were in place that was causing that response and consequence to stress?
And once you start to question these and try and look at them objectively, you can also take the emotion out of it and have an objective view of it and decide whether you were being rational or not. Remember we said, a lot of the time when it comes to a stress response, we are irrational.
Yeah.
Taking a step back, bringing awareness to the consequences and your beliefs around it allows you to take a more objective stance and bring that rationality to it.
I was actually just going to bring something physiologically in there as well. The reason we're so irrational when we're stressed is because of the hormone cocktail of hormones going on at that moment in time. They were designed to give us laser focus on the thing that was on the threat that was causing us most concern at that moment in time. It was amazing as a survival instinct years ago for our ancestors, but it gives you tunnel vision, so it stops you, it gives you brain fog, it stops you thinking rationally. Physiologically, that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's my problem most of the time, because I'm just focused on you and your threat.
Oh dear, goodness me. Right, so that is one way to look at it, is actually look at that in your life, an example of that. The next exercise is just become aware of what that inner dialogue is. What's really, really going on, that inner critic, I would say, that inner dialogue. What are you telling yourself that causes you to believe that thing? Where did that belief, I'm going to take it a step further, where did that belief even originate? Is it even yours? Where did it come from? What memory, situation did that belief first originate from? Because then we can bring compassion to it. Awareness brings compassion to a situation. So rather than beating yourself up, saying, oh, it's so annoying, I believe that. Actually say, okay, I wonder, be curious, wonder where that came from.
Why do I believe that?
Yeah, why do I believe that? Where did it even come from? And that inner dialogue is really interesting, just to script it down. Don't judge, but just notice. Start becoming the awareness. start stepping out and becoming aware of what you're thinking, almost like an outside force looking in on yourself. The next thing is the subconscious mind loves questions. It adores them because it has to go through the file of facts of your mind in order to find the answer to your question. So it's going to naturally want to shift through a whole heap of memories and give you something solid as an answer. So some of the questions around the ABC model, you know, when that activating event is happening, or you've recognised what that activating event is over and over again, it's normally a similar thing over and over again. Ask yourself, what could I do to minimise that trigger or activating event? Sometimes you can't, but what can I do as a boundary setting exercise to minimise that trigger? Is it, you know, your in-laws? Is it them kind of coming in and stepping over your toes in your own house? Is it that friend that calls you in an inappropriate time, expecting you to speak to them all the time? And it causes stress. What could you do to actually set those boundaries and minimise that triggering event?
Then how would I like to respond to this event? You know, what do I want to choose as my reaction to it? Because recognising that you do have the power to choose your reaction, you know, is empowering in itself, and you can choose a different state as a result. And then once you've got that, you ask yourself, what would I need to believe in order to react in that way? So it's just like, what do you need to tap into? Because it's already there in you. I'll give you an example. You know, yesterday we were driving. We'd had a very long day, and we were driving through traffic. And Google Maps seems to take us on the worst possible route through London. So we're stuck in massive traffic jams. It's very, very frustrating. Of course, it's easy to just get really wound up, really stressed, like, ugh. And you go, you know what? We're seeing a different part of London. We're still moving. We're still going to get to where we want to go home at a reasonable time. So it's just reframing it allows us to like reduce the stress around it.
Absolutely. And some other questions we're going to pose to you. I will ask this first one, then James will do one. So these are questions.
But I think this first one, can I just interrupt here, Claire? This first one is the most powerful one of all, I think. Because as a shorthand, as a shortcut, as a hack, as a tip, I would say once you've actually recognised that stress event, where you recognise if I give you a visual reference to it, if you could press pause, if you're watching it, a video of yourself, you could press pause just to see where you are and just tap into what you're feeling and just go, is it really true?
We always say that, don't we?
Is it really true?
It's a powerful question.
Is it true that if A happens, B will happen, C will happen as a consequence? Is it true that it's inevitable this will happen this way?
Does it always happen?
These are the consequences. Does it always happen? Am I always doing this? Because once you start questioning, is it really true on all those facets of the situation, you'll find the answer is no. No, of course it's not always really true.
Am I always really terrible on dates? No, of course that's not true, because you probably had some successful relationships out there. Is it really true that all your reports are useless? No, you've actually done some really good work before. Is it true that you always mess up public speaking? There's probably some examples in the past where you have had some confidence in certain circumstances. So it's not always true that what we're telling ourselves in the moment. So just asking that question. The other questions are, am I overreacting? Are my expectations too high?
Nah,
am I taking this? To me today. What is this?
Oh,
I have high expectations.
You do have
and
high
No, it's good. It's good too. I'm trying to convince him now. Am I taking this too personally? I'm not taking what he said too personally. And what might be going on? This is a big one.
Really big one.
What might be going on for the other person here? You know, we are, again, in our own little world. We view the world through our lens, okay? That is not always very helpful, because we could be doing all those things, overreacting, expectations, taking it too personally based on our worldview. But actually, what's going on for that other person that's making them behave that way? We're not saying excuse their behaviour sometimes, not at all, or something that's happened. We're not saying it doesn't matter, but we're just asking you to take a step back, have that awareness, and just ask yourself what might be happening for that other person right now.
The other thing we can do, which kind of like encapsulating everything we just talked about, is reframing your inner dialogue. So, you know, going like, oh, I realise I'm actually telling myself something terrible. So I'm actually producing this physiological response, my adrenaline and my cortisol. This isn't a rational response to what's happening to me. You know, if you're not facing a wild animal, if it's just like a snarky email, you're like, actually, I don't need this physiological response to fight or flight. Recognize that you do have control over your work and your life. You know, recognize you are capable of doing a good job. You are capable of, you know, producing great reports, of doing great presentations.
Yeah. Sorry, darling, to interrupt you. I would. One of the things that Alex said was like, how would you suggest people do this? And I was like, actually having that pad and paper there, writing a new dialogue or having a new dialogue ready for when that comes in, when that belief system comes in, that triggering event, having the consequence. You can feel it happening, you can see it happening because the consequence is happening. Having that new reframed dialogue in a dialogue is really helpful, but writing it out so you can read it and go to it in that moment is really, really helpful. So it might be something like as simple as, I am safe in this moment. I do not have to be superhuman. I am doing my best. There is plenty of examples where I have done my best. I am allowed to feel like this right now. I am safe. I am well. I have the answers within me. I just need to relax. I need to calm down and all will be well. So that kind of dialogue that you can go to and read quite quickly is so important, really important.
I mean, essentially we're just talking about rewriting the script of the event that's happening. So, you know, and recognising you do have the power to rewrite that script as you want to.
Absolutely. And then just a few other things we just wanted to mention. You know, it's quite powerful to create like an anchor, a pattern interrupt. We've talked about this in other podcasts, but if you're feeling stressed, and you've done all of this already, so you've really worked out what it is, the belief systems, how you would like to behave instead. Actually having a pattern interrupt before you go into a real stress response, something like pinging an elastic band, even on your wrist, or pinging something or holding something that's the anchor to a better dialogue, to understanding that you have a choice in that moment, that you actually can reframe this and tell yourself the new belief that is more helpful, and then the new behaviour then precedes that. So it comes after that is really, really helpful. So just having like a pattern interrupt from the automatic, these are all very automatic responses. When we're stressed, it's physiological and then it's emotional and then there's this consequence that happens. So it's all, you know, bringing awareness to this, we'll say this over and over and over again, is really important. And then having something that is a pattern interrupt that reminds you that you can choose differently is really, really powerful as well.
The other thing to do, which will sound silly, but it's true, is remember to breathe. Because when we go into a stress response, we tend to do really shallow breathing from high in the chest. So if you can, just remind yourself to breathe deep breaths, taking it right down into the belly, get the oxygen flowing through your body.
Yeah, because actually the whole thing about not being able to think straight, again, is physiological. You're breathing really shallowly, so you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain. So you've got tunnel vision, you're behaving irrational because you can't think straight, you haven't got enough oxygen. And the last ones we're
not going to leave you without this.
Exactly.
So we're talking about very specific mindset strategies here, tools to use. But of course, the better your overall health, the more you are moving that glorious body, the better you are nourishing it, the more able you are going to be able to deal with stressful situations effectively.
Your nutrition, your movement, they're so interlinked to you being able to manage your stress levels and being able to stay in control, healthy and happy, okay? It's our responsibility to look after our body, and being in a stress response all the time is really, really is not going to help you moving forward in your life at all. So we've given you the ABC strategy there, some extra tools, but just making sure that you are moving your body to release stress, and eating well will massively help too. So that is it for this podcast.
It is. We're sending you so much love.
Hope you enjoyed it. Do share it with anyone that needs to hear it. Please rate and review and subscribe to our podcast.
And tell your friends.
It's so appreciated. It really helps us to spread the word. We've gone, skyrocketed, and we're so grateful. We can't tell you how grateful and how humbled we are by the constant messages and responses and the wonderful reviews you give us. So please keep it up. If you haven't reviewed us and you haven't shared it with your friends, please do so. And we're sending you an enormous amount of love.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Midlife Mentors with Claire and James Davis.
We'd love to hear from you. So drop us a line at info@themidlifementors.com with any questions or topic suggestions.
And make sure you join us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find us under the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah.